Welcome everyone to Ladder Daily Digest. We honor creators, and we're doing, we'll say, a part 2 to Lori Vallow. Not that Lori Vallow is a creator; she's actually a destructor. But I'm friends with Megan Connor. Megan, thanks for coming on the show.
Sure.
Hey, Megan.
And so I thought I'd take the opportunity to give my viewers an update to what this second Arizona trial is about. And so we last talked with Megan just before the first trial, and Megan can talk a little bit about the first trial and then everything that's been happening leading to today for the second trial and what the second trial is all about.
Now my first question obviously is, has she been exonerated yet from her crimes?
No, she has not been exonerated, nor has she been released from prison by angels as she predicted. And apparently there were no angels on the jury as she predicted there would be. So
Interesting.
So far, her predictions have gone awry.
And I guess Christ may have given her some bad information.
It's possible she could have gotten some bad information from Jesus Christ. Yes. But she now believes that she is on a special mission to be a support and a teacher and a helper for all of the women in her pod, to teach them how to be exonerated for their crimes.
Prison ministering.
Yes, she is on a prison ministry mission right now.
So she provides PMS, prison ministry services for the women.
There you go.
She definitely does all of the symptoms that go along with it as well.
Yeah. And so what was the outcome of the first trial?
So Lori's first trial was in April of 2023, and that was for murder of Tylee, JJ, and Tammy Daybell. And it was
in
also,
Idaho.
Yes, in Idaho, grand theft by deception on several counts. And she was found guilty on all counts.
Grand theft by deception?
Mm-hmm.
What? I don't remember that.
So she was, after the children were killed, she was still collecting Social Security benefits for each of them. Joe Ryan is Tylee Ryan's dad, and he died in 2018 under suspicious circumstances, I might add. They did collect some life insurance for that. And then Tylee was receiving Social Security payments because she was the dependent child. And Joseph Ryan, was her dad. And so she received, I can't remember exactly, somewhere around $1,100 or $1,200 a month, I believe, from Social Security as a child of a deceased parent. Then when Charles Vallow was killed, JJ started receiving Social Security benefits as the child of a deceased parent. And Lori also received Social Security benefits because when you're married to someone for more than 10 years, if they pass away, you're entitled to Social Security benefits when they die. So in total, Lori was collecting around $4,000 a month in Social Security payments. When the children died, of course, those payments should have stopped, but she wasn't going to alert anyone to their deaths, of course. And there is a lot of discussion about her name. Some people get offended when you call her Lori Vallow. Some people get offended when you call her Lori Daybell. Of course, nobody wants to be associated with her or have her carry their name. But legally, her name was Lori Vallow. Even though she married Chad Daybell in November of 2019, I don't believe that she went to the Social Security office to have her name officially changed because she was in the process of defrauding the Social Security Administration at the time. And if she alerted them to her marriage to Chad Daybell, they would have ceased the payments to her for Charles Vallow. So
she's just keeping everything quiet.
Right.
Just not making any waves so she can continue receiving these benefits, which is not very uncommon. I've actually seen that a lot in my experience.
Right. So somebody gets remarried, but they don't let people know. They don't let the administration know because they want to continue collecting those benefits. So anyway, her legal name is Lori Vallow, but she has been asked for this for these last two trials. She's been asked to be referred to as Lori Daybell, and we can see her in the courtroom wearing a ponytail elastic around her ring finger. So she's still very much married to Chad Daybell.
So what is meant by grand theft?
So grand theft is any theft that is over, I believe it's $1,000. I think it might vary from state to state, the actual amount, and I probably should have looked that up. But yeah, so the theft was in relation to her receiving all of those Social Security payments fraudulently.
It's probably like anything over $500 or $3,000 or something like that.
In Arizona, I know when I was a police officer, it was $3,000 that constituted grand theft. But who knows now? That was
Right, and in Idaho, could be different as well. But there were 3 separate counts of grand theft by deception. One for the payments she was receiving for Tylee, one for JJ's payments, and then one for her payments for the death of Charles Vallow.
I'm sure restitution was also imposed on her, right?
I don't believe so. I don't remember that being a part of the sentencing. I just know that she received 3 consecutive life sentences for the deaths. And I don't recall there being separate sentencing for the grand theft charges, but there may have been, because it was a time for me when I was not reporting on the case. I was just listening to the trial, and I was actually live on Mormon Stories when the verdict was read. And a lot of that was very emotional, and it was a blur for me. So I don't remember a lot of that portion of the trial.
That's right. Those conviction things might have had a statutory, the punishments could have been automatic, right?
Oh, right.
Compared to a jury trying to say, well, do they get the death penalty or 30 years or 20 years or, the penalty phase.
The penalty phase, right.
Yeah.
So
they might not have needed a penalty phase for those things.
Maybe not. And what I focused on was that she's never going to leave prison. That's what I was focused on. The death penalty was on the table at the outset of the case. And then the state failed to file some discovery in a timely manner, and they were able to get the death penalty taken off the table for that reason. So she is serving 3 consecutive life sentences in Idaho. And then the following year, Chad Daybell was convicted, and he did receive the death penalty. He was convicted for the same 3 deaths. And then Lori was extradited to Arizona.
Oh, yeah, and I was going to say that we'll have in the description of the show a link to our prior interview about a month ago, where you went into a little bit more detail of the whole offenses and the Idaho trial, mm-hmm. and what events leading up to the first Arizona trial were. But go ahead and continue with what you're going to say.
Okay. So she was extradited to Arizona to stand trial for conspiracy to commit murder in the death of Charles Vallow. And Charles was the first one killed. And so Lori and Alex, her brother, had a pattern of punishing her ex-husbands. Alex was sort of Lori referred to Alex as her protector quite often. And
the first one that we know. We don't know if she's killed other people prior, right?
That's correct. We don't know for sure. We do know that Alex assaulted Joe Ryan during a custody exchange, and he was arrested, tried, convicted, and served jail time for that assault that he did on Joe Ryan. And that was Lori's. Right? He tased him, yes.
Yeah. And
that was Lori's 3rd husband, Joe Ryan, who was Tylee's biological father. But they set up this scenario, and none of this is alleged anymore because she has been convicted in Charles's death. But Lori and Alex conspired to isolate Charles and confront him. And then Alex shot Charles and claimed that it was self-defense. And the investigators on the case did find some discrepancies in their stories and some odd circumstances surrounding the death, but neither Lori nor Alex were arrested at the time of his death. They were both interviewed by police and released. The police did collect all of the evidence. They took Charles's cell phone and laptop and all of that into custody, and it was not initially ruled self-defense. It was considered an ongoing open investigation. So that shooting happened in July of 2019. There were many of us who did not believe it was self-defense, knowing Alex's history and, Lori's patterns, etc. That's kind of what caused a rift in our family at first, because Janice and Barry, Summer, I believe, also initially believed that Alex was a hero for protecting Lori from Charles's abuse, quote unquote abuse is what Lori called it. But the landlord, who was a good friend of Charles and knew Charles very well, did not believe that it was self-defense. And he asked Lori to move out of that house by the end of August of 2019. So she left in August of 2019. She did not tell her family where she was moving to. She said goodbye to her oldest son, Colby, and they left town, and nobody heard from her after that in her family. So she, Alex, Tylee, and JJ all left and went to Idaho, which is where Chad Daybell was living. And basically, Lori cut off contact with the rest of her family. So it wasn't until October where Brandon Boudreau was shot at. So I probably need to back up a little bit because people will get lost. So Lori and Alex took Tylee and JJ. They moved to Rexburg. They moved into a townhome complex. And Lori's townhome was just 3 or 4 houses away from Alex's townhome. So Lori was in one place with Tylee and JJ, and Alex had his own place. Now, prior to Charles being killed, Lori's niece, Melanie, filed for divorce from her husband, Brandon. So actually, I apologize, guys. We're going to have to rewind even more so people understand. So Lori's family of origin, her parents are Janice and Barry Cox. They had a total of 6 children. Their oldest daughter, her name was Stacy. Stacy married Steve Cope, and together they had one child, Melanie, spelled Melani, no E at the end of her name. And so Melanie was the oldest of the Cox's grandchildren. So Stacy was the oldest, then Alex, then Adam. Then they had a baby named Laura Lee who died when she was 6 weeks old. She had a congenital heart defect. And about a year and 4 months after they called her Lolly. After Lolly died, Lori was born about a year and 4 months later. And then Summer is the youngest. Going back to Charles Vallow's death, Melanie, who is Lori's niece, became really close with Lori because Melanie's mom died under suspicious circumstances when she was about 32 years old. Sorry, what was that, Randy?
Oh, I just said go figure. Suspicious circumstances are kind of an ongoing topic with this family.
Right. I don't know if I've told you guys that story before, have I? I was there when, yeah, okay, well, after we do this recap, I'll go back and tell you that story because it's an important one.
I wanted to say that if Alec had access to a gun when he tased his brother-in-law, I personally know that he would have gone and killed him.
Right.
But he didn't have a gun and he didn't have access to one. He tried to get one through me. And that's when I said, no, absolutely not.
So that potential murder got downgraded to just sort of scaring him or something.
Yeah.
Well, Alex's intent, according to family stories, his intent was to tase Joe, throw him in the trunk, and take him somewhere and kill him somewhere else.
Oh, wow.
But he was caught and arrested instead.
And that's why he didn't show back up to work where he was working, and I was at working as well. He never showed up because he was in jail.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm actually, this is all clicking for me as well. It's like, okay, yeah, now I get it.
Right. Yeah, I was stunned when you sent that message, forwarded that message from your old coworker about him asking her for bail money, right?
Yeah. Our boss actually went there and bailed him out.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah.
Wow.
And so Megan interviewed Randy on her channel about his dealings with
Alex,
the Cox family. Alex
Cox. Yeah. Randy knew Alex well.
I knew Alex well, and I met his sister Lori, and we went on a kind of a double date. So there's that.
Yeah. You can go watch that video on my channel. That was a really fun conversation, despite the subject matter. And my channel members absolutely loved you and insisted that I bring you back on, Randy.
Well, I love them too.
Well, good. So going back to the story, so Stacy died when she was 32. So Melanie was only about 9 years old, maybe closer to 10 years old when Stacy died. And so, and Stacy and Steve's divorce was very contentious. Steve did not like the Coxes and did not want his daughter around them. So he ended up with full custody of Melanie. And it was partially because of Stacy's illnesses at the time. So that divorce happened when Melanie was just 6 years old, I believe. And then, 3.5 years later, Stacy died. And Steve did his very best to keep Melanie away from the Cox family. But Melanie found, I believe, Adam on social media somehow because he was a radio DJ. And he was pretty easy to find. So she actually, in her teen years, got back in touch with the Cox family, and she became very close with Lori. She's very much saw Lori as a mother figure for her. In June of 2019, Lori convinced Melanie. So Melanie had married Brandon Boudreau. She became Melanie Boudreau. They had 4 children together. They seemed to have a beautiful, idyllic sort of life, at least from what I could see on social media. Brandon seemed like a great father, and Melanie was doing all kinds of things. She went to basic training in the Air Force. She ran marathons. It seemed like they were doing really well, and like she was doing things that were improving her life, and it looked great. And then in June of 2019, she and Brandon filed for divorce. And I later found out that Lori had convinced Melanie that Brandon was gay. And I guess there was an office party, and they had, dressed up in drag and were dancing, just kind of having fun. And Lori convinced Melanie that absolutely meant that he was gay, and he was involved in all these terrible things with his office, with his coworkers, and convinced Melanie to file for divorce. And so she did. In June of 2019. And then Charles was killed in July. Lori and Alex left with the kids in August. And then Kay Woodcock started, raising the alarm because she hadn't heard from JJ. And they used to FaceTime with him a couple of times a week. And she hadn't heard from JJ in a really long time. And so she was trying to get family members to tell her, "Where's JJ? I haven't heard from him." Brandon was one of the family members, I think, that she reached out to, because Brandon and Melanie's divorce had been quite contentious. And Brandon was awarded custody of the kids initially. And because of some of the strange behaviors of Melanie and some of the strange beliefs that she had related to, what Lori was teaching her with all of these conferences and near-death experiences and things like that. On October 2nd of 2019, Brandon was coming home from the gym, and he noticed a Jeep with Texas license plates parked near his house. And as he was approaching the driveway, he was about to pull in, and the back window of the Jeep came up and a gun stuck out, and a bullet struck the frame bar of the driver's side window. And he took off. Apparently the Jeep also took off. And I initially thought that he had followed the Jeep trying to figure out who it was. I don't know if that's true, if I got that mixed up with another story, but he did call 911. They came out and they took a photograph. They took some photographs, of course, took his statement. Turned out, Brandon wasn't sure if it was a real gun or not. Well, it turned out that it was a real gun. Brandon works in insurance, and he noted the license plate of the Jeep and remembered that Charles owned that Jeep and had asked him to insure it. And the reason he remembered it is because he's in insurance, and he remembered the license number and model and all of that of the Jeep once
And
they
Texas,
started looking.
It was a Texas registered car.
Right. So that Jeep was registered to Charles Vallow. It was the Jeep that Tylee Ryan drove. Brandon actually, when they asked him, do you have any enemies? Is there anyone who would want to hurt you? And he said, well, there's kind of some crazy stuff going on with my aunt, but I hope this has nothing to do with that. And that's when people started to put two and two together. Brandon hired a private investigator, and the private investigator was instrumental in helping to put these pieces together and get law enforcement agencies to talk to each other. And that's when suspicions became more and more heightened over all of these circumstances and the fact that the children hadn't been heard from. I believe it was the end of October when Melanie moved to Rexburg in the same townhome complex, in fact, right next door to Alex. And Melanie and Alex had gotten to know each other. Melanie said that she and Alex would talk for hours on the phone while he was driving doing his over-the-road trucker stuff. And so Melanie lived right next door.
I was also going to say that maybe ostensibly she moved to Idaho to get ready for Jesus' second coming.
Of course, because that's what they believed. Chad had predicted, I think there was going to be an earthquake in Salt Lake sometime in the fall of 2020. I don't know if you know this, but we're all still here. That didn't happen. The world has not ended yet.
Oh, okay.
Jesus did not come yet.
So now what, I don't quite understand. Why did they want Mr. Boudreau dead?
Well, he had $1 million life insurance policy. Melanie was close with Lori. And during Lori's first trial, it came out that Lori texted Zulema Pastenes, who is one of these people in the group of Chad's followers. She was one of the closest ones.
Zombie looker-outers.
Zombie casters.
So
Yeah.
she had already been exposed to visions of glory.
Yes, they all had.
The Chad Boudreau situation.
And I suppose if Lori has this influence over Melanie, Lori could think, if Melanie gets $1 million, I have access to $1 million.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to say, is that there was a text between Lori and Zulema where Lori indicated to Zulema that Melanie had plenty of money to help take care of everyone.
So Chad wasn't abusing anyone or hurting anyone, correct?
Not that I know of.
Chad
I mean,
Brandon.
Brandon Boudreau. Melanie's ex-husband was
the one that Alex shot at and
Alex
hit
shot
the bar.
at Brandon. Right. He was not hurting anyone. He was not abusive. He was a good man. He survived the attempt. He's a good man. He's a good father. I actually got to meet him and I sat right next to him on the first day of the Charles Vallow trial. So I got to meet him and his new wife, and she's lovely as well.
So it was
Jenny.
It was just a money thing, apparently. Then
I believe so.
Gotcha.
So. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he also was sort of aware of Lori's influence over Melanie because she had caused some things going on, right? Did Lori cause their divorce in a way?
Yes, absolutely she did. Brandon is not gay. He was not doing anything shady with his coworkers, but Lori convinced Melanie that was going on and convinced Melanie to divorce him.
Wow.
That is it's an indicator of the amount of influence that Lori had over Melanie and over everybody in this group, really. So that shooting happened on October 2nd. On October 19th, Chad's wife, Tammy, died under suspicious circumstances. That death was ruled, initially was ruled natural causes, but she was only 50 years old. She was in very good health. And no, she was 45, I think, which would have made her a lot younger than Chad. Anyway, she was in very good health. There would have been no reason for her to pass away suddenly. But it was initially ruled as natural causes, and Chad did not want an autopsy, and she was buried in Salt Lake about 4 days after she died. They had a very quick turnaround for the funeral for that.
Sure,
so that's
before
October.
they could do an autopsy.
Right. So that's October 19th. That death is the main reason I believe that everybody finally started putting things together, because law enforcement knew that there had been text exchanges between Lori and Chad. They knew that Lori and Chad were spending time together. I believe that's when they started surveilling Lori and Chad after that death happened. Finally, they were able to, get enough probable cause together to go and do a welfare check on JJ to find out where he was. I need to think about timeline. It's so hard to keep all these dates and everything straight.
I'm so impressed that you have just rattled all this off. That, I mean, obviously this has just been such a big part of your life that you have all of these dates and timelines. I can't believe you've done as well as you have.
Well, for me, it has been the reason why I have kept track of everything and been so involved in this is because in my family of origin, there were all of these family stories. And it turns out that most of them were not true or that they had a grain of truth to them. And I was so sick and tired of being lied to that I wanted to know the truth. And I've learned more truth about my family from reading FOIA documents and legal filings than I ever did from talking personally to one of my family members, And so for me, it's a matter of having the facts straight, because I was tired of being gaslit my entire life and being lied to.
And speaking about family, you mentioned early on that Lori had created sort of a rift in the family, where one side thought Lori was wonderful and the other side was beginning to suspect that Lori was capable of doing bad things. Now, Lori has been found guilty in Idaho and now in Arizona. Is the family all unified in one, or do some members of the family still believe in Lori?
Well, I don't think any of the family members believe that she is not guilty. At this point, the division happened in the death of Charles. That was where some family believed that Alex did act in self-defense and some didn't. As time went on, and later on, Alex passed away, and my dad was talking to his sister Janice, who is Alex's mom, and said, why weren't we told about the death, and why weren't we invited to the funeral? And she said, we only invited people to the funeral who didn't believe he was a murderer. So it was a very small group of people. So even up until the time that Alex died, that part of the family still believed that it was self-defense, that he hadn't done anything wrong. And Janice and Summer famously went on a 2020 and did an interview prior to the children's bodies being found. This was after Lori was arrested, and they defended Lori. And they said, she's always been a great mom. She would never hurt those kids. I don't see anything that would indicate that she was responsible for them being gone. We don't know where they are, but we trust Lori. She tells us that they're safe and we believe her.
And those two things can happen at the same time. One, that Lori could be a murderer, and two, that people that she has treated well love and respect her.
Yep.
I saw something on the news, one of the reports about Alex being married. Was he married?
Yes.
Because we
So
never hear about his spouse, or I've seen very little about it.
right. So going back to the timeline, Tammy died on the 19th of October. And then 2 weeks later, Chad and Lori went to Hawaii and got married, November 5th. The welfare check on JJ didn't happen until the end of November. So the police officers went to the apartment complex to do a welfare check on JJ. And they ran into Alex and Chad. And they asked Alex if they knew where Tylee and JJ were, and they said they didn't know. And at the time, they were just looking for JJ because Tylee, was older, and even though she hadn't been seen, nobody had reported her missing. And Lori was telling people that she was going to BYU, Idaho. And so there was less suspicion about Tylee. Even though she was only 17, Lori was telling people that she'd gotten her GED and was going to BYU, Idaho. So the police officers asked Alex if they had Lori's phone number, and he said that he didn't. And then they asked Chad if he had Lori's phone number, and he said, well, I don't really know her very well. But at this time, police know that they're married and they know how close Lori and Alex are. Yes, exactly. Knew her biblically. So they knew that Alex and Chad were not being honest with them. So they finally did go to Lori's apartment. Lori told officers that JJ was with her friend, Melanie Gibb, in Arizona. They called Melanie and she said, no, I don't have him. Chad and Lori called Melanie and asked her to lie to the police, and she didn't. But anyway, they, through doing the welfare check and everything, they realized that, JJ was not around. And that was when they also were alerted that Tylee hadn't been seen either. Now, I think I forgot to mention, I think just prior to this, Melanie met and married Ian Pulowski in Idaho. Well, they were married in Las Vegas, but she met him, I believe, in Idaho. He was divorced in August. Melanie and Ian met in November, and they were married, I think, by the end of November. And that's also when Alex was married as well. Alex married Zulema Pastenis in Las Vegas, and he opted to take her last name. So Alex then moved to Arizona and never went back to Rexburg.
So was his wife involved in the trials?
Zulema has testified in both trials, both Lori's first trial and Chad's trial as well. She was not called as a witness in Charles's trial, but Lori has her on the witness list along with Melanie Gibb on her witness list for the Brandon Boudreau trial. Going back to, sort of the timeline of what was happening, Melody marries Ian, and on their wedding night, sometime the day that they were married, she tells Ian about all of these beliefs that she has in Chad Daybell's teachings. And Ian becomes alarmed hearing the timeline of everything that's happened. And he's so concerned about it that he contacts his ex-wife to express concern for their children. And so he cooperates with police and the FBI and agrees to wear a wire to record conversations between Melanie and her Aunt Lori and Chad. Nothing damning ever ended up coming out of those conversations, which makes me think that maybe Ian tipped off Melanie somehow or something. I don't know. But Melanie also testified. She testified in Lori's trial, I believe, and then she was scheduled to testify in Chad's trial and ended up not being called. But Ian did testify in Chad's trial. So we got to hear some of what came out from those recordings. But then it wasn't until early in December, Melanie Gibb contacted Rexburg Police Department and told them that Chad and Lori asked her to lie for them. And so shortly after that, they decided that Tammy Daybell's death was suspicious, and they exhumed her body on December 11th of 2019. And then on December 12th, Alex died. Now, the reason you will never be able to convince me that Alex's death was natural causes, it was ruled natural causes. The official cause of death was a bilateral pulmonary embolism. That means blood clots in both of his lungs. Just a few days before this turn of events, Chad Daybell gave Alex a patriarchal blessing. And in that blessing, Chad described that Alex had been valiant and had completed his work, and he would know when it was time for him to cross over to the other side.
A swan song.
And when I talked to Larry Woodcock, who is JJ's grandfather, about that patriarchal blessing, he said that blessing was that man's last rites. So we don't know. Yeah. And Alex had gone to Mexico just maybe a week before the death, his own death, and had gotten some medications and things. It's pretty easy to get what you need in Mexico, whatever that may be. And so I don't know if Alex took his own life or if Zulema had a hand in that. But Zulema was a trusted member of Chad's group, and Alex and Zulema were basically ordered to get married. They were told to get married. And the person who performed the wedding ceremony noted that it was a very, very strange ceremony. He said it was very rushed. There was no real emotionality involved. You know, Alex taking her last name and Melanie Boudreau, who would become Pulowski, was a witness in that marriage. And then she married Ian the following day. There are some other suspicious circumstances surrounding that marriage, but I won't go off onto a tangent now. I'm trying to do the timeline for this case. We could spend hours talking about all the tangents on the side.
That's right. And I just want to bring up really quickly is that if you want to see the timeline, you could go to Wikipedia and look up the Vallow Daybell Doomsday Murders.
Yeah.
And you can go check that out. And
yeah, check my dates because there are certain dates
down a rabbit hole.
Out.
Yeah. And so that's just wanted to let people know that you can get a little bit more on Chad, a little bit more on Lori, and there's her wonderful American Idol picture from jail, and learn about the murder of Charles Vallow, and etc. And so that brings us to all the things that happened, basically, or a lot of them, where all of a sudden the focus was on this Brandon Boudreau case. When was that something that the Arizona police and justice system decided that they were going to try to do something? Was it more recent, or did it have to do with the Idaho conviction?
Not necessarily. So let me just finish up the timeline there.
Right.
So Alex died December 12th, and then I believe that it was December 20th when the kids were officially declared missing, and all of the information went out over the AP wire. And that's when most people started learning about this case. There was a small following, a small contingent that had been reporting things here and there. Most people didn't hear about it until the kids went missing. They served Lori and Chad with papers in Hawaii saying that they needed to produce the children proof of life within 7 days or they were going to be arrested. Lori was eventually arrested in Hawaii early in January, and she was brought to Idaho, where she stayed in jail. Janice and Summer did that famous interview, I believe, in March of 2020. And then on July 9th of 2020, or was it June 9th? I think it was June 9th of 2020. is when the children's bodies were found in Chad Daybell's backyard. That was when Chad was arrested that day. And that was when the charges for Lori were changed from child abandonment to murder.
I'm sorry, Megan. What were the findings when they exhumed Sandy's body? Was it Sandy?
Tammy,
Tammy's
yeah,
body.
Yeah. So when Tammy's body was exhumed and replaced within hours, the medical examiner, did an autopsy, and those autopsy results were not released until much, much later. I want to say years later, honestly. As they were building the case and everything, there were certain things that they didn't want to get out. Yeah. And so even though they exhumed her and they had those results probably within a week of doing that, they did not release those results because they wanted to find the kids, and they wanted Lori and Chad to feel comfortable and relaxed that nobody was after them, so that they might reveal possibly where the kids were. I believe, that's my opinion.
And it was June 9th where they discovered
Thank you.
remains that they had yet to identify.
Right. I believe that they alerted Kay, the law enforcement alerted Kay Woodcock, JJ's grandmother, prior to that day, or maybe that morning, that they believed they knew where the remains of Tylee and JJ were, and that they were going to search the property. And so I believe Kay knew right away that those were the kids' remains. The rest of us had to wait a little while to find that out. And Brandon Boudreau is actually the one who went and identified JJ's remains so that Kay and Larry would not have to. He was there with them during that whole ordeal. And so he is a beloved person to the family. Yeah. So it wasn't until 2023, I believe, that they decided to press charges against Lori for conspiracy to commit murder in Brandon's death. And it took a little while. I think it took a while even for them to build up a case for Charles as well, because of some of the investigation that was and was not done on the part of the Arizona Police Departments. It was pretty difficult to come up with enough evidence to charge Lori. And the prosecutor mentioned that if they hadn't had the second bullet, Charles was shot twice, once while he was standing and once when he was on the ground. If they didn't have evidence of that second bullet on the ground, she said she didn't think they would have had enough to convict her. But ultimately, the jurors remarked that what really sealed the deal for them were a couple of different text messages that were exchanged between Lori and Chad and between Lori and Alex, and the timeline of that case. But the main text message was that Lori found out she was not the beneficiary of Charles's life insurance. He had changed the beneficiary to his sister Kay prior to his death because he knew that they were up to something, and Lori had even threatened to destroy him. And she said, "I could kill you and have an angel help me dispose of your body." So he obviously was afraid for his life, changed the policy. And then when Lori found out she wasn't receiving that money, she texted Chad and she said, "It's like a dagger to my heart, but at least we'll still have the $4,000 from the Social Security, from SS," is what she said. And then Chad responded, "It'll be interesting to see if he changed it before he had 2 bullets in his chest." And he said, maybe it was Ned before we got rid of him. Ned was the name of the zombie or the demon or the evil spirit that they said was inhabiting Charles's body. So the jurors said that it was those text messages that really put it over the edge for them.
Any of those text messages sent from the temple, or was that all the you shall be like Nephi?
Like Nephi. So I believe it was Lauren Matthias of Hidden True Crime put together that prior to each one of these deaths or attempted deaths, Lori and Chad were in the temple together the night before or the day before.
Oh my gosh.
That's right. When I posted some of the articles years ago, 21, 22, 2023, whatever, people would say, that had been members of my ward would say, this has nothing to do with Mormonism. And I said, it has everything to do with Mormonism. They were texting what they were going to do from the temple. They felt they were receiving God's word in order and blessing to do these things.
They thought they were receiving revelation from God that these people were possessed by evil spirits, and they believed it was their mission in life to cleanse the earth of all of these zombies. And at one point, Chad said there are somewhere between 30 and 40,000 zombies.
So that Jesus could return, because
Right.
Jesus can't do it by himself when he comes back. He needs Chad and Lori to do it for him.
And their coven
and minions.
Of gatherers. Yeah.
Their covenant path covens.
Yeah.
And Visions of Glory was a book they were reading. Is that right? And
yes, Visions of Glory. Visions of Glory is a book that was written. It was ghost written by, I forget his name, John Pontius. But John Pontius was the as told to. Tom Harrison was the person who had the visions and gave the story to John Pontius. And he a
BYU professor?
Tom Harrison was a licensed therapist who was advising the church. He was recently on the council that decides that gives mental health evaluations to missionaries, deciding whether or not they're mentally fit to travel to foreign missions. The book Visions of Glory talks about apocalyptic vision, where Tom Harrison plays a character named Spencer, and Spencer is a gatherer trying to gather in the 144,000 who will usher in Christ's coming. And in that book, he details a vision where he sees evil spirits entering the bodies of people when they do unrighteous things like drinking or watching pornography. And so some of these beliefs that Chad and Lori had stemmed from the ideas in that book. And at the end of the book, as he's going around to gather the 144,000, he talks about the fact that there's a war going on between, the good people and the gatherers and the rest of the world. And he says, he would have a group of people with him who are righteous, and they would be traveling to the tent cities. And he said, we'd come across these groups of other people, and we could tell just by looking at them whether or not they were righteous. And he said, if we knew that they were past feeling, quote unquote, meaning that they were not going to repent ever, then they were free to deliver them from mortality.
And were those people zombies?
Yes. And what it says in the book. They had
zombie vision.
Yes, they could tell if somebody had a dark spirit or not. And that's basically what Chad was teaching as well, that he knew how to determine if someone was dark or light. And after you're a certain number on the dark scale, you can never cross back over to the light. That's basically what he was saying. And in the book Visions of Glory, the smoking gun, as far as I'm concerned, is when he says that we were free to deliver them from mortality, and their death would be a blessing to them because they could no longer add sin to their divine ledger. So justifiable homicide.
And that's tangent to what teaching that Brigham Young had?
Well, it's justifiable homicide, just like is in the Book of Mormon with the story of Nephi and Laban, and blood atonement was the teaching from Brigham Young that if you committed sin, that you needed to spill your blood onto the ground in order to gain salvation. And
just to let everybody know, blood atonement was also part of the Lafferty brothers murders in the mid 1980s. Go ahead.
I don't know how any member of the church could deny the influence of the church in all of this.
No, there is no way to deny it unless you're just absolutely delusional and sticking your head in the sand, because not since the Lafferty brothers were on trial has the Book of Mormon been so prominently mentioned in a court case. The text that went back and forth between Lori and Alex, Lori says to Alex, "I will be like Nephi, I am told, and so will you." And after Charles died, Zulema texted to her friend Melanie Gibb, "It was a Nephi and Laban ending."
Oh my gosh.
There is absolutely no way that you can deny that this has everything to do with the church. It's personal revelation. It's justifiable homicide. It's literally, the prosecutor began the last trial, the Charles Vallow trial, by quoting all of the times that they said, "I will be like Nephi." And she said, "be like Nephi," so many times in that opening statement that I had to do a video explaining to people the Nephi and Laban story, because so many people were going, what does this mean? When Lori's brother Adam was questioned on the stand, he was asked to tell the story of Nephi and Laban as he understood it. That's in the court record now.
That's right. 20 years ago, when I first started hearing from maybe co-workers or other people like, isn't the Mormon church a cult? And I started thinking, well, if we're a cult, we're the nicest cult ever. And now I'm wondering if the Mormon church isn't maybe a death cult, but it's the nicest death cult ever.
Yeah, and the thing is, I always have to say this, the majority of LDS people that I know are good, decent people, just trying to be Christ-like and trying to serve God. But high demand religion attracts people with mental illness because it answers a lot of those existential fears that people with mental illness can't really get a grapple on. High demand religion also creates mental illness in the form of religious scrupulosity. When you have a checklist of things that you have to do in order to become perfect or to get into heaven, people can become obsessive over checking off all the boxes on that list. And that leads to mental illness, which leads to beg the question, when you're receiving personal revelation, how do you know if it's you or God or mental illness? For a lot of people, they
And Joseph
can't
said
make that distinction.
Joseph Smith said the same thing, but he said the devil instead of mental illness. He didn't know sometimes whether he was receiving revelation from God or just from his mind or from the devil.
Yeah.
And so if he didn't know, then that's another thing.
That's a big red flag. And most people will say, most reasonable people will say, if they, have a thought come into their mind that, perhaps somebody might be evil or dark, or, maybe they're being influenced by Satan, their thought doesn't go to, well, I should probably eliminate that person from the earth then. Most reasonable people would go, that's probably a thought that's coming from the devil. Maybe I shouldn't pursue that.
Most
But people with narcissistic tendencies, people who believe in the absolutism of their correctness, will get a thought like that come into their head and think, wow, God really does want me to kill this person, or does want me to harm them, or whatever the case is. So it's just very problematic to have the idea that you can get revelation from God to hurt another person. And that's what happens in the Book of Mormon.
That's right. And, I'll say another thing. The day before the Heaven's Gate people became famous, the day before the Jonestown movement, People's Temple became famous, they were just another high demand religion.
Yep.
And so the Book of Mormon is away on trial for the Lori and Chad Daybell trials as well.
Yeah.
And so
I also want to say to, Janice, Lori's mom, when Lori started telling Adam that she was a translated being and she didn't need to eat, and if somebody shot her, the bullet would just go right through her, Janice said to Adam, she's not hurting anybody with these crazy beliefs. Just leave her alone. So I always just want to say, if you have a friend or a relative who is coming to you, telling you that they've had visions, or that they believe they're an exalted being, or that they have special powers, please help them get help. Don't just say, well, that's a weird thing for you to say. And
Or
dismiss it.
everybody's free to believe whatever they want, because there are very harmful beliefs
Exactly.
that exist.
Yeah.
Well, that makes it scary for everyone when
Exactly.
people in the name of religion can just snap like that and believe that they're called to eliminate those who are not living up to the standards that they think need to be lived up to. How scary
Exactly.
is that for everyone?
It's very
You know,
scary. And the thing that scares me is that I know that there are people who believe what Chad and Lori were teaching who are still out there believing these same things. Because there was a whole Church of the Firstborn. There's a whole group of people who were right along with Chad and Lori, reading their blogs behind paywalls on the Avow website and attending the Preparing a People conferences, listening to Chad speak and going right along with it and still believing it. Now, Preparing a People has rebranded itself now into Latter-day Media, but Mike and Nancy James are still promoting the same types of beliefs about dreams and visions. And there's a huge contingent of people who still believe these things that led to the deaths of so many people.
That's right. And I first heard of Visions of Glory because of Lauren Matthias, I think, when she was doing a podcast, and I happened to be listening, and she zoomed in on a photo of Lori in Hawaii at a swimming pool. And it's like, if you zoom in, the book that Lori's reading is Visions of Glory. And I call it Versions of Gory now.
I call it Delusions of Glory.
And you call it Delusions.
But that photo of her at the pool, that was the day she was served with the papers to produce the children. And she had that book, Visions of Glory. She had it marked up like scripture. She would carry it around with her and quote from it. They found a copy of it in her car when they impounded her car. There was a copy of it on her nightstand when they took the crime scene photos at Charles Vallow's, the house that he was renting, where Lori was staying, the house he was killed in. So that book, that harmful book, Lauren and I went on Mormon Stories with our friend Mindy Caldwell, and we did a 5-hour expose on that book and on how that book was also read by Jody Hildebrandt and Ruby Franke.
of course.
Also, Tim Ballard. Also, Ken Krogh, who is another therapist who believed his patient was possessed by a demon and beat his patient almost to death.
Was Chad convicted? The reason that he's received a death sentence, is that for the murder of his wife, Tammy?
Yes, and the children as well.
They were able to conclude that he did kill Tammy.
Yes.
Okay.
They eventually did release the results of that autopsy was asphyxiation at the hands of another. They believe that she was held down by more than one person.
Oh, gotcha.
And Alex's car, well, I should say, Alex's device pinged in the church parking lot just a short distance away from Chad's house the night that Tammy died.
One last thing about Visions of Glory is the whole Wikipedia page about the Vallow Daybell Doomsday murders doesn't mention that book. So if anybody knows how to update Wikipedia and somehow add Visions of Glory to the Wikipedia page, they should do it, because that is a linchpin, I would say, to all these different harmful things that have happened.
Is there a Wikipedia page on the book? Will you look it up and see? Because if there's not, I will make one.
There you go. So
I'll check even as we speak here.
Visions of Glory does not exist as a page.
Needs to.
So it does need to.
So
anyhow,
I also want to mention that in the Book of Mormon, there is a group of evil people called the Gadianton Robbers. And they are the group throughout the Book of Mormon that is credited with overthrowing governments and secretly killing leaders and things like that. Brandon Boudreau was referred to as one of the Gadiantons. And so now Lori's hopefully third and hopefully final trial is for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, in the shooting, attempted shooting of Brandon Boudreau. Thank goodness he survived the attempt. He's alive. He is in the courtroom for the proceedings. But Lori hopefully will get some time added on to her sentence. Now, she was convicted in Charles's case, but not yet sentenced. They were withholding sentencing until after Brandon's case has been tried, and they will sentence her at the same time for
Doing
both
both
cases.
together.
Yeah.
And
but
so
there's no way she's eligible for parole ever, right? Is that correct?
No, she would not be. Well,
I'm pretty sure it's on a cold day in hell, I think, is when.
So her 3 consecutive life sentences in Idaho. She won't ever leave Idaho prison. Let's put it that way. But because they were successful in getting the death penalty removed, of course, she still has appeals and things that she can do. And the prosecutor's comment in Arizona was, I don't know what's going to happen in Idaho. And if she gets away in Idaho, I want to make sure she dies here.
There you go. And there could be some wild, maybe say conservative president that wants to curry favor with crazy people that can do commuting or whatever of sentences, right?
Yeah.
But
who knows? Yeah.
Hopefully that never happens. I'm not putting it out there for it to happen. I just don't want that to happen.
I don't think anybody in their right mind wants something like that to happen, for sure.
And so the jury has been selected. And
no, it hasn't.
Oh.
We had a bit of a snafu. So jury selection started on Thursday, 2 days ago. They selected 66 people out of the 295, I think, that returned questionnaires to come back in person. And then the following morning, on Friday morning, they selected 2 more to come back. So a total of 68. So they met in the afternoon. All of the jurors were present, and the judge announced, due to unforeseen circumstances, we won't be able to continue with jury selection today. And everybody just absolutely went bananas and lost their mind because this judge has done such an excellent job of putting Lori in her place. He was very patient with her and accommodating with her in the first case, and she's tried to get him thrown off the case. But her requests for that were denied. Well, the issue is this judge is being rotated out of this court at the end of June or the beginning of July. So if there's a delay in this case, it'll be a different judge. So everybody's losing their minds. Like, please, let's not have another judge. Let's just, let's get this over with. So the judge ended up asking the jurors if they could come back on Monday morning to finish the in-person voir dire process. And 11 of them could not. So they were released. But the remaining jurors will come back on Monday morning. The judge expects to seat the jury at that time. And then he's expecting opening statements from both teams on Monday afternoon. Originally, next Friday, they were going to have the court be excused for different, obligations or whatever. They've decided to bring that Friday back onto the docket to make up for the time. So hopefully everything will go fine. The jury will be seated on Monday morning and we'll proceed without a delay.
And so did they get together? Then the judge, did he need to discuss it with the judicial panel and say, what do you think? Should I stay on this case? Should I recuse myself and assign another judge?
No. So
why the delay on Friday? That's what I'm trying to get to.
Oh, I think the delay on Friday, or the not having court on Friday, that's been on the docket for a really long time. It was a conflict that I think the prosecutor had with another case or something like that. So it didn't have anything to do with this. But Lori verbally asked the judge to recuse himself for the obvious personal bias that he showed against her in denying every single one of her motions. And he had a perfect, wonderful response to that. I wonder if I can
play it.
Oh, shoot, it's not in here. Yeah, I would love to play it for you because it was the best 29 seconds of court that we have ever seen. Let me see if I have it here.
What day he said that? Was that a couple weeks ago or just recently?
It was during the final trial management conference on
the middle of May.
Yeah, May 14th, I think. Yeah. But I was counting up, I was making some notes earlier this morning. Lori has filed 5 motions to have this case dismissed. And after Judge Boreski said, no, I'm denying your motion to recuse myself, she filed an official motion with the court to have him removed from the case. That motion was heard by the chief magistrate. Her name is Judge Green, and Judge Green denied her motion to have Judge Boreski removed. So he remains on the case and will remain as long as the timeline doesn't get messed up.
Will this next trial be televised?
So yes, they will have a camera televising. It'll be on a 30-minute delay. But it will be, the rest of it will be televised. They don't televise, jury selection, because they want to keep the jurors anonymous, obviously.
Sure.
But they will televise the rest of the trial. I do have this, so let me see if I can share it.
And so what you're saying is Monday afternoon, they'll have the opening arguments?
Opening statements are scheduled to be on Monday as long as the jury gets seated that morning.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the expectations.
Yeah.
Right.
So sorry. Okay, I'll play it again.
Your Honor?
Yes.
I'd have to ask that you would recuse yourself from the obvious personal bias that you have against me and send us to master calendar for this scheduling of a trial.
And what personal bias is that?
A lot, obviously the personal bias that you're showing right now and that you've shown on the FTR several times during the trial.
Okay, well, I don't have any personal bias, all right? I've over-accommodated you on when you have to disclose things. In fact, your expert should be summarily precluded today, and I haven't done that, all right? So
You denied every single one of my motions since for a year and a half that I've been here. Every single one of my motions has been denied. And have any of those motions not have merit? You've denied every single motion.
I think I was here this morning about 15 minutes ago when I granted your motion to meet with your attorneys over lunch hour. I have granted other motions of yours, okay?
That's the first motion that you've ever granted
Well,
in my behalf.
file motions that have a legal basis and I might grant them. I've ruled on the motions as required by law.
Without any kind of a conclusion of law in them, just denied, 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 denied. Does that not show a bias and a prejudice against one single person?
All right, are you done?
Are you not going to recuse yourself,
No, I'm denying your motion.
Your Honor?
Yes.
Touche,
Oh.
Judge.
That's right. Are you done? There was another hearing that she had where the judge had to ask her, are you done? Or are you just going to keep, and then she was interrupting him. This happened just a couple of days ago. It was right before jury selection started. And, she had a few questions of the judge and she was interrupting him. She was rude to him. He just remained even keeled the entire time. He was so calm and put together. And then the prosecution, he said, is there anything else? And the prosecutor said, well, Judge, are you going to address any of the outstanding motions that we still have prior to trial starting? And he said, I believe, considering what happened yesterday, it would be safer for me to just issue written rulings on those motions. So in other words, he said, I'm not going to allow her to speak anymore in my courtroom. Shut up, Lori. You don't get to talk anymore. He's just going to issue written rulings from now on because you don't get to argue anymore.
She needed that.
Absolutely, she did. And then the reason for jury selection being ended yesterday was obviously, or in my opinion, it was because Lori was ill. The judge said to her, if something happens at the jail and you end up being quarantined, you need to let your advisory council know right away. And I think she was sick of not getting her way. I think that's the illness she has.
Psychosomosis or whatever it's called.
Yeah, psychosomatic illness.
Psycho,
Yeah,
psycho being the biggest part of the word there.
right. Right. So anyway, I think what we're going to see in Brandon's trial, I think we'll see a lot more text messages, a lot more communication. We're going to see evidence that Alex left Rexburg very early on the morning of October 2nd and drove all the way to Phoenix, Arizona. We're going to see that he was caught on traffic cams and that he had receipts from various rest stops and Taco Bell and whatnot in his car, as well as a lot of communication going back between all of these parties conspiring that Brandon needed to die. And what is also interesting to note, and what a lot of people don't know yet, but I think will come out in the trial, is that Brandon and Melanie's divorce was not final yet on October 2nd. And they were in the process of selling the house, and they were going to split the proceeds from the house. The closing on that sale was set to be on October 3rd. If they had succeeded in their attempt, Melanie would have gotten the entirety of the proceeds from that house instead of just half.
Well, thanks, Megan, for coming on our show.
Of course.
We had a wonderful discussion, and I really enjoyed talking with you. Thanks, Randy, for helping co-host.
It's always a pleasure.
We'll let people have this information, this update, to see if you want to pay any attention to the trial that's going to happen over the next few weeks. Megan will be providing her own input, for doing some shows. And so we recommend you go over to Megan's channel to see what she's got going. Are you going to plan on doing a daily?
Yes, I'm actually going to be streaming the trial from my channel, as well as doing a midday and end of day recap. So I'll be on all day, every day while the trial is going on, Monday through Friday. And then sometimes I get invited to go on Court TV or Vinniepolitan or News Nation or something like that in the evenings. So you'll get very sick of me over the next couple of weeks. And I don't think the trial is going to last much longer than a couple of weeks. But I am going to go out to Arizona for the sentencing, for the verdict and the sentencing.
I don't think there's any way and nothing you could do that would make us get sick of you, Megan.
I had almost the exact same thought, right? And so thanks everyone for watching. Share, like, and subscribe. Have a great rest of 2025, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
See you.